Thank you for checking out this episode of Wiregrass Daily News Sports. You can find the podcast over at wiregrassdailynews.com or wherever you get your podcasts. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. Leave a review, and I will read it on a future edition of the show. And if you just leave 4 stars, you are just a straight up hater. You can follow me on social media over at PJordanSEC. You can email me at sportstalkphillipjordan at gmail.com. Everybody, welcome in to the Wednesday edition of Wiregrass Daily News Sports. And I have a great guest here on the show today, Tony Tsoukalas. He is the managing editor of Tide Illustrated, part of Rivals.com. We're going to talk all things Alabama here, recap the Arkansas game, and look ahead to the Tennessee matchup for this Saturday. But Tony, I appreciate it. I know your first time coming on this show. We've done this many times on my former podcast, but I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, I'm glad to be on. Thanks for having me.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. The people here in the Wiregrass will be very excited to hear about the Crimson Tide. I know with everything going on, and it's just been an interesting year. It's not, I think, a team that most Alabama fans are used to seeing. They're used to seeing like Saturday 24-6. They're used to that being doubled up, maybe putting 30 or 40. Just if you could define this Alabama team, what would be your definition?
Undefined. It really doesn't have an identity. I think that's what drives people crazy. I guess it can be defined by it's got a really good defense. And I think that the pass rush and the defense could be special. But on offense, it's just so unpredictable. Sometimes it can run the ball, sometimes it can't. Sometimes its passing game looks like it's moving the ball. Other times it just, goes anemic. I don't really know what to say about the offense. It's been unpredictable. And really, this Alabama team, I think that's what makes it so frustrating is really you don't know what to expect, and I think just it's a team that's going to have to fight for everything it gets. I think it's got enough talent to be a contender, but it can't let its foot off the pedal for a second. And we saw that against Arkansas. I think that, past Alabama teams can get a little bit complacent and just – rely on their playmakers. And I just don't think this team it's not the same level as some of the other Alabama teams that could afford to do that. I think it's going to instantly pay every time it takes its foot off the gas. And so far, we really haven't seen it put away a team just because it hasn't been able to play that full 60 minutes. And I think sometimes even before, Alabama, it might look like they play 60 minutes, but they had a little bit of a let up in the game, but you didn't really see it because the team was so talented. I think this team is just not that level. So maybe that ends up making it play harder. And maybe that could be a reason why this team will succeed is it just literally has to try harder than most teams. But at the end, it's not as good as some of the Alabama teams we've seen in the past, but we've also seen some really good Alabama teams struggle and fall short of expectations. And this team still has all its goals ahead of it. So, as much doom and gloom as you want to bring after that sloppy Arkansas game, I mean, this team still sits atop the SEC West. It controls its destiny. So, I mean, it has everything to play for. But it is one of the more strange years, I will say, of that I've covered from an Alabama perspective.
I was listening to Greg McElroy on his podcast, and he made a point that this Alabama team, like in the past, Alabama could play their B game and still blow a team out. Now they can't do that. They have to play their A game or close to it. And, the SEC, I think in a way is down this year. It seems like actually the playing field is kind of more even in the SEC this year than it has been in previous years. So you kind of agree with that, with what Greg McElroy said? Like they pretty much have to play their A game most weeks to be able to win now.
Yeah, that's what I was saying just about taking their foot off the gas. I think I actually missed Greg's podcast, but that's pretty much exactly how I feel. And it's just not at that level where they can just coast in games. But and you said the SEC being down. I think all of college football is kind of evened out. I really don't think there's many teams that are just head and shoulders above the rest. I mean, Michigan's looking good, but are they really?
Yeah.
We'll see how good they are. And there's a bunch of teams where I don't necessarily believe in Ohio State. We'll see what they look like against Penn State. Actually, that'll be a good testing game for both those teams. And then, I was high on Texas, and then they lost to Oklahoma, and I'm hesitant to be high on Oklahoma, and I'm hesitant to be high on Florida State. I just think there's a lot of teams that are good and maybe even great, but I don't know if we have an elite team like we have had, in recent years. Like I think we had three really elite teams in a row there with 2019 LSU, 2020 Alabama, and 2021 Georgia. I just don't know if we have a team like that this year.
Yeah, we'll find out about Georgia without Brock Bowers, see how much that changes things for them because that's the best player on that team without a doubt. But back to Alabama and Arkansas Saturday, win 24-21. I know early on I was watching the game and then Arkansas was moving the ball in Alabama, but kicking field goals. I'm like, okay, this ain't gonna work. You can't beat Alabama kicking field goals. Then Alabama caught fire. Jalen Milroe hitting the deep shot. If there's one thing he's really good at, he is good at throwing the deep ball. The medium game, still work in progress, but the deep ball is there. What did you just see? Just kind of stick in the first half of Alabama. Like I said, Arkansas played well early in the first quarter, 6-0, getting pressure on Milroe, but then Alabama kind of took over there in the second.
Yeah, Jalen Milroe was 7 of 10 for like a 215 or 210 yards. I forget what he had at the half, but it looked like he was like gonna cruise into having his second straight 300-yard game. And at that point, you're starting to think like, man, does this guy have it figured out? Is this like the beginning of something here? And then, man, it just was a total role reversal in the second half. But in the first half, they're running the ball okay. They really started running the ball good in the beginning of the third quarter. And so I think that the positive you take from Alabama's side is that, you did have those long passes, but you kind of already knew that the passing game could be pretty boom or bust. I think the positive you take is just the running backs all did really well, and Alabama kind of got into the depth of its backfield, which, it really has been just Jace and Roydell this season, but you got to see some Jam Miller and a little bit of Justice Haynes. And, I think maybe we see more of that moving forward where just every one of those guys is pretty good. So you might want to get more carries. Justice only got 2 carries for 11 yards, but he had that nice 10-yard run. Jam Miller had a couple of big runs, and he's a guy that I was expecting to kind of break out this season, hasn't done it yet. So maybe that could kind of jumpstart him a little bit. And then both Jace and Roydell had good games too. So that's the positive I'd take, from that perspective. I think it's not really a surprise that Alabama held Arkansas on the ground because the Razorbacks just can't run the ball with this offensive line. It's that had been the case in the 2 previous weeks. It's been the case against Alabama. It'll be the case moving forward. This Arkansas team doesn't move the ball very well on the ground, so that wasn't really a surprise. But it was kind of what you were expecting. I thought it was going to be a statement game in that first half. I thought it was going to be one of those games where you just kind of run the ball down their throat, and Alabama kind of makes a statement that, here we are. But it wasn't. It ended up being a real sloppy game and something that's going to almost maybe hurt them on their resume when it just looks at, they only beat Arkansas by 3.
Yeah, especially, wow. And Nick Saban talked about it after the game. I mean, you look at Arkansas, if you look at their record, you think they're a bad team, but they've been in pretty much every game they played except for an A&M game. And it's talking about KJ Jefferson, key in the little comeback there in the second half. Just trying to tackle the guy. I mean, I think you have to send all 11 Alabama defenders at one time to get him down. I mean, he's a handful, which Nick Saban now has another classic quote about him. But did you see anything Arkansas was doing offensively? Was it more Alabama that led them to get back in the game?
I think it's, Alabama would shoot itself in the foot a few times. You had the penalty on Jalen Key. You had the pass interference. I mean, a little bit more lenient towards the pass interference just because you got to try to make a play on that ball. And, Caleb Downs got kind of beat and he should have turned around a little bit more. So, but Jalen Key's, penalty there, they would have stopped him on that drive. And, it was a play where, first of all, his block wasn't even, or his play wasn't even associated with the play, and it was out of bounds, and it happened after the play. It's just like, what are you doing? I think you even saw on the telecast, if you're watching it, it kind of showed Deontay Lawson kind of point up, like, can't make those mistakes. Kind of like taking him by the shoulder and being like, what are you doing? And so mistakes like that on defense, and then just, they went away from the running game. I don't know really why they went away from the running game as much, but the passing game just fell apart. And the pressure, a lot of that was due to the pressure that they were getting on Jalen Milroe, and that created some short drives for Alabama, and that's something that especially at the left tackle position between Caden Proctor and Elijah Pritchett, that's something Alabama really needs to work on. But I don't know if it's necessarily one thing Alabama did or one thing Arkansas did. It's just Alabama lost focus, really, and then that's kind of what led to it.
Yeah, you heard Nick Saban talk about that. It's all about stuff that Nick Saban said. Of course, on Monday, had his Monday press conference. Anything big stand out to you from what he said? I know he talked about giving up the sacks, obviously with that. But anything coming out of that really stood out to you?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, or just from an Arkansas standpoint, that he said on Monday was just that the team actually did execute when it was focused, and I think that's probably a fair statement. I think when Alabama was locked in, it looked like it was doing what I think most people would expect it to do against Arkansas. It's just a matter of losing focus, and it's an odd that Alabama lost focus the way it did. I think with an early 11 o'clock kick, maybe you would expect them to start slow and have the opposite of this game. Maybe where they just started really bad, you could tell, they weren't up for this game, but it was the opposite. And how do you I think it's almost worse the way it happened, because you start wondering, like, all right, well, how did Alabama let it get that way? How did Alabama, if they were up for the game at first, what does it say about this team that it allowed itself to take its foot off the gas? It's one thing to come into a game not ready. It's another thing to kind of fade. And I think it says it's almost worse to fade, because at that point you were geared up and then you allowed yourself not to be, So I don't know. I think it's a frustrating team. I think Nick Saban, when he talks about it, you can kind of tell there's only so many things he can say. He talks about the offensive line, and he talked a little bit about he said a lot of it just comes down to fundamentals. They can get people lined up and they can work on things, but really it comes down to players executing the way that they have to. I don't think that Caden Proctor or Elijah Pritchett were executing the way that they need to execute, and you start to wonder, does Alabama have to do something drastic? Do they have to, maybe if they get Terrence Ferguson back by the bye week, maybe you start experimenting a little bit with Tyler Booker at left tackle and maybe moving Terrence Ferguson into guard. I mean, that's just, you almost have to start thinking that way, because it's one thing to say, like, oh, Caden Proctor, Elijah Pritchett, the light bulb will come on, but it's been 7 weeks now and it hasn't come on. It's, at some point, you almost have to wonder, is it going to come on for those guys, at least this season?
Yeah, absolutely. Looking at the Tennessee matchup, of course, I don't think we're going to have the high scoring affair that we had last year between these two teams going into this one. Certain quarterbacks aren't there anymore, Bryce Young and Hendon Hooker. And Tennessee is a different team this year than they were last year, too. They're not as explosive at wide receivers they were. Obviously, guys left, Hendon Hooker not there. But they're a really good run team. They're actually number one in the SEC in rushing right now. Leading the way is Jalen right there. And defensively, they're top 5 in the SEC. Probably something a lot of people may think of with a Josh Heupel team. And last weekend against, or Saturday against A&M, they really continually and constantly put pressure on Max Johnson. Just for you in this matchup with Alabama and Tennessee, what really sticks out for you, especially on the Alabama side of things?
I think it comes down to protecting Jalen Miller, or Jalen Miller getting rid of the ball, because you look at this Tennessee, front seven, and it has they can really get to the quarterback. They're just as good as Alabama, better maybe just a little bit. In terms of getting to the quarterback, and Alabama's been giving up 4 more sacks for the last 6 weeks, and it's hard to think that Alabama's not going to at least give up 4 sacks against Tennessee. I just don't see how that happens. I don't, we talked about the light bulb coming on. I mean, it's just if you look at this matchup, that's like the one almost guarantee that I'd give you, is that Alabama's going to give up at least 4 sacks, just because it's what they do. And Tennessee's a team that's going to be able to exploit that. And we saw what Tennessee can do on offense. Last year was more about what they were able to do in the passing game, but the real spread out, offense that Tennessee has, it opens up running lanes, and it creates space, and it also puts more pressure on the linebackers. A lot of times, you have the help of the safeties and the cornerbacks that can come crashing in on some of those running plays. Well, if those guys are out, in the Sahara on the sidelines over there, with as far out as Tennessee puts their receivers, then it's a lot harder for them to kind of help out on running plays. So it puts a lot of pressure on Deontay Lawson, and I think he's going to be a key player for Alabama, and they'll probably kind of go as he goes, and it also puts some pressure on the defensive line too. But that running game is going to be tough for Alabama to stop. One, because it's a good running game, and then two, just because of the formation and the challenge that comes with that.
And I kind of think back Tennessee to the Florida game when they went to Gainesville, and Florida run the ball very successfully against them. I kind of got to wonder too, is Alabama looking at that too as well? Okay, we got Jace, you got Rodell at running back. Obviously, what Jalen Milroe can do also in the run game. Hopefully, Alabama fans are always wanting to run the ball. It doesn't matter who the offense coordinator is at Alabama. That's always the battle cry. Just run the ball. But I think Alabama's got opportunities on their side to be very successful in the run game in this matchup.
I think so too, and especially if it's clicking like it was against Arkansas. I mean, it was really concerning to see, what Texas A&M did against Alabama's running game. I mean, I think it was the third time in Saban's in the Saban era that Alabama had more attempts than rushing yards, and so for Alabama to bounce back and really do a 180 against Arkansas and move the ball on the ground, it can show what they can do. And I think there was that one sequence where they had 3 straight runs of 10 or more yards in the third quarter. And they were just really running it down Arkansas's throat. If they can get that going, and that's only going to help open up the field too for Jalen Milroe. It's just going to make life easier for everyone. And I think that that's probably a big key to this game too. You said it's not going to be a shutout. You're going to want to keep your defense off the field, get them rested. It's going to be a lot of pressure on them stopping this Tennessee offense. So, I think that it could be a rock fight, and you can't have these short drives that really doomed Alabama against Arkansas. You're going to have to be able to consistently move the ball, have some of these extended drives, and there's no better way of doing that than consistency on the ground. It's not just the 10-yard runs either. Nick Saban talked about on Monday just getting those 4, those 5-yard carries, and just those are the things that extend drives. And that's really what Alabama needs, is that kind of consistency. They've been so boom or bust in a lot of what they do that, it's those intermediate passes. It's those, 4 and 5 yard runs. That's really what makes offenses go now. And then you have the big time plays. But if you rely solely on the big time plays, what Alabama does, you're not going anywhere. It's not sustainable. You talk about if you play at Georgia or maybe even at Tennessee this week or an LSU. LSU is a different thing because their defense hasn't been doing that well. But when you play better defenses, I think that you can't just have this boom or bust, because more often it's going to be bust. And then you're just going to fall apart like they did in the second half.
Yeah, you mentioned LSU. That'll be who's next. Alabama hits the off week after this week. Then you got LSU. You got Kentucky. Look, who knows? Kentucky's good defensively. Maybe if Devin Leary starts playing like he's capable, like he did at NC State, maybe Kentucky's a dangerous game. To Chattanooga, we know what that game is. And, of course, you go to Auburn to close out the year. We always know when Alabama goes to Jordan-Hare, just Jordan-Hare has something magical about it. It's always a game despite whatever Auburn is doing. Just even when you look at the rest of the way, what do you think is going to be key for Alabama moving past Tennessee?
I mean, the pass protection. They really gotta get better about that. I think eventually that's just gonna bite them. It hurt against Texas. Eventually, it's gonna hurt them again. They've gotten away with it time after time after time, but there's going to be a team that's going to be able to exploit that. Either that, or it's going to, instead of sacks, it's going to turn into more turnovers. They just got to fix that. And whether it's making a drastic change or whether it's just down to Caden Proctor or Elijah Pritchett, one of those two figuring things out, they're going to have to make some kind of change. And then just, this is still a good Alabama team. And if they play mistake-free football, don't turn the ball over, like they're going to be in most games, and they've got Tennessee at home, they've got LSU at home, and then you've got two of those trickier games in November against Kentucky and Auburn on the road. But I still you would like Alabama's talent against both those two teams, and so I think Alabama's still in a good position to you know to con- to go to Atlanta to win the SEC West, and then to really have a puncher's chance against Georgia if they can start figuring things out by then. But it's almost like you can't even look past Tennessee, because this Alabama, which just goes back to what we said at the beginning of the podcast, where this Alabama team is so unpredictable and it can't let its foot off the gas. So you really can't even start thinking about LSU or Kentucky, or you just gotta look at Tennessee, because they could easily lose against Tennessee. And if they lost against Tennessee, they could still probably win the West, but the season's at that point pretty much over, because they're not winning a title at that point. So it's just 1 week championships. And I know it's what Nick Saban tries to preach, and it kind of sounds cliche, but that's the way Alabama has to play it from now on out. And maybe that will make them a better team, because they can't afford to coast. And so maybe that makes them more focused. Maybe that makes them improve more in areas, but it's a different Alabama team than what we're used to seeing.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, you got to take care of Tennessee. There's no looking past that. Looking to LSU and what else is beyond that as well. But it's going to be fun seeing how it goes on Saturday. I always look forward to one of the best rivalries. Tennessee, it is more rivalry now, so Tennessee got a win last year in this one.
Yeah, and this rivalry goes in streaks, so Alabama's got to worry about that.
Yeah.
If it goes in a streak, it could go in the wrong direction. And look, if Tennessee can win this one and the next years in Tennessee, they could start streaking the other way, and that's the last thing Alabama wants. So I think it's going to be key for Alabama to kind of put an end to this and get things rolling in this rivalry the way that they're used to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So it'll be fun. It'll be a fun game on Saturday, as always, when these two get together. But Tony, always fun when you're on the show too, as well, talking all things Alabama. Where can the listeners, viewers, check you out if they want to follow your work?
Yeah, the site's TideIllustrated.com, or you can go to alabama.rivals.com. It'll take you to the same place. You can follow us at Tide Illustrated, or you can follow me at Tony_Tsoukalas. And I think it has the way my name's spelled. So if you have any trouble with that, it's on the screen right there. So just at Tony_Tsoukalas.
All right, sounds good, Tony. Anyways, I appreciate the time, and I look forward to talking again sometime down the road.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you for checking out this episode of Wiregrass Daily News Sports. You can find the podcast over at wiregrassdailynews.com or wherever you get your podcasts. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. Leave a review, and I will read it on a future edition of the show. And if you just leave 4 stars, you are just a straight up hater. You can follow me on social media over at PJordanSEC. You can email me at sportstalkphillipjordan@gmail.com. And once again, thanks to Tony Tsoukalas for being on the Wednesday edition of Wiregrass Daily News Sports. And now to get out of here, just some news items, a few more than what we had yesterday. So let's just jump right into it. On the high school side of things, the Dothan Wolves home game versus Jag High School, formerly Jeff Davis, on Friday, November 3rd, has been moved to Thursday, November 2nd. Dothan City Schools tells WDHN, that's where we got this news from, the reason for rescheduling the National Peanut Festival opens up on that Friday, so they're going to move the game over to the Thursday, obviously looking to get more people at pews on that Thursday night and not go up against the National Peanut Festival. But also that night, selfishly, I was planning to go see Troy and South Alabama play at the Vet that Thursday night. We'll be doing that. But we will be on the air on Thursday night on 96.9 The Legend, along with Jerry Coleman, Ken Lambert, and myself, getting you through the game. But we'll give you updates on the Trojans, too, as well, during that broadcast. So that means that the coaches show will be on a Wednesday that week. So just kind of plan accordingly on that week. The final week of the high school football season, too, as well. We hope Dothan Wolves, the the seedings land where you want them, results happen where you want them, and hopefully the following week playoffs doesn't be at home, but also very well that could be the last home game of this season. So you want to be crowd. So we understand why they're doing that. In college football, some Auburn news from Tuesday. Defensive back Keontae Scott and linebacker Austin Keys both practiced on that day, on Tuesday. Scott has been out with an ankle injury that he got against Sanford, and then Keys has been out with a thumb injury since the first game against UMass. Both had surgery on that, so we'll see how they progress. See if they're on the field this Saturday night against Ole Miss. Also, running back Damari Alston. Remember, he got hurt against Texas A&M, dislocated shoulder. He was at practice, but he was in a yellow non-contact jersey. He participated in practice last week, but same thing, the yellow non-contact jersey. So I just hearing that, I wouldn't expect to have Damari Alston on the field Saturday night. Be a big help for Auburn in the run game. Add him with Jarquez, Jeremiah Cobb, Brian Battie. If you could add him in that, that'd be big. But I just, being in the non-contact jersey, just I seem like it's a very, very slim shot that we would see Damari Alston on the field on Saturday night. Now in SEC basketball, SEC Media Days are this week. Really gets kicked off on Wednesday, today, and Thursday. So throughout the rest of the week, we will talk about this. But I'll go ahead and let y'all guys know something about next week's podcast. We will dive more deep into basketball. We have an SEC basketball preview. We'll focus on Alabama and Auburn. Blake Lovell from the Southeastern 14 will be joining me next Wednesday on the podcast. So he will be on to break it all down. Blake, big SEC basketball guy, one of the best out there. So he'll be joining me on the show as well. He has an NFL podcast he does as well. So we may jump into some NFL stuff with some of the Southeast teams here, like the Falcons, the Saints, and also the Titans. But anyways, we do have the media's predicted order of finish. Tennessee is predicted to win the conference, followed by Texas A&M, Arkansas, Kentucky. Alabama is coming in at 5, Auburn at 6. You have Mississippi State at 7, Florida at 8, Missouri at 9, Ole Miss at 10, Vandy at 11, Georgia at 12, LSU at 13, and South Carolina finish it up at 14. Also announced the first and second all SEC teams. On the first team, 2 in-state players. For Alabama, you have forward Grant Nelson, and for Auburn, you have forward Janiah Broome, also there, a forward as well. Nelson is a senior. Broome is a junior. The rest of the first team looks like this. Arkansas forward Trevon Brazile, guard from Kentucky Justin Edwards, forward from Mississippi State Tolo Smith, guard from Tennessee Santiago Vescovi, and then guard from Texas A&M, more on him in a second, Wade Taylor, the fourth. And then the second team, no Auburn players, but one Alabama player, guard Mark Sears is there. He's a senior. And then also throughout the rest of the second team, all guards, Devontae Davis, Riley Kugel from Florida, Antonio Reeves from Kentucky, and then Sakai Ziegler from Tennessee. And then the player of the year that they voted on will be Wade Taylor Ford from Texas A&M. But like I said, we will dive more into this next week here on the show when I have Blake Lovell on with us. And that'd be fun too, having Auburn, Alabama, and Troy. We'll get into some Troy hoops too as well when they get going, just to have something a little during the week for some games to discuss as well. Over in the NFL, just a couple things here with some of those teams we follow here and a former Alabama player. Quarterback Ryan Tannehill talked about on Monday's show how against the Ravens he got hurt, ankle injury. That's what he had last year. He had to have surgery. ESPN's Jeff Darlington is reporting Tannehill will not need ankle surgery. It's a high ankle sprain, but there's no timetable for his return. The team is off this week. They're 2-4 on the season. Like I said, they lost to the Ravens on Sunday in London, 24-16. Looking at the next 4 opponents for the Tennessee Titans. Next Sunday, they'll play Atlanta at home, but then they have 3 straight road games. On November 2nd, we'll be have a lot of football on November 2nd. They will be at Pittsburgh on that Thursday. Then on November 12th, they'll play at Tampa Bay. And then on 11-19, they will be at Jacksonville. My personal opinion, Malik Willis, I know he's just in his second year, barely played, a year. But you got to go Will Levis. You draft him in the second round. I think you got to give him a shot. Malik Willis a shot too as well. Get him in there. Just see what you got with those two the next 4 weeks. I could tell a lot, especially on the Malik Willis side since he's in year 2. in your system and just see what Will Levis has in real NFL games against the best players versus what we saw him in the preseason. Former Alabama player, Atlanta Falcons great Julio Jones was signed by the Eagles on Tuesday. He's a 7-time Pro Bowler. Philadelphia is 5-1. They just lost their first game to the Jets. It was upset city on Sunday. The Jets beating the Eagles, the Browns with a third-string quarterback beating the 49ers. And I got to looking at this. This is 7 former Alabama players on the Philadelphia Eagles. When you count Julio Jones, you got Jalen Hurts. For everybody out there, yes, I know he graduated or his final year was Oklahoma, but look, he's an Alabama player too. He used to play at Alabama, an Alabama great. Then you got wide receiver Devontae Smith, guard Landon Dickerson, guard Tyler Steen, and 2 defensive backs, Josh Joby and Eli Riggs. So Philadelphia, they got a lot of Georgia players on the team. I didn't write all that down, but they got a lot of Georgia players on the Eagles too as well. And then finally some Saints news, and they play on Thursday night against Jacksonville. But running back Jamal Williams returns from the IR. He has missed 4 weeks due to a hamstring injury. We'll see if he plays on Thursday night. That might be a quick turnaround for him, just getting to practice and then playing on Thursday. But we'll see if he adds to the running back depth there for the Saints, who are 3-3, and the Jacksonville Jaguars are 4-2. So that should be an interesting game on Thursday night between those two. Thursday night too, Enterprise folks, Opelika and Enterprise are playing. So be keeping notes. So Friday's show with Matt Lowe will open with thoughts on Enterprise Opelika, and I may talk about the Jaguars and the Saints as well, because I know there's a lot of Saints fans in the Wiregrass. I think the Saints, the Falcons, the Titans, a little bit of the Dolphins are kind of like the Southeast teams fans right here. Like, of course, you have the fans of the Dallas Cowboys. There's some Steeler fans here, Packers fan. So it's kind of served us too as well. We talk about the Braves. Well, we'll jump into those as well. Of course, here in Dothan, in the Wiregrass, Southeast, we're more college fans. College is kind of the priority. But yeah, keep you guys updated on those teams. And maybe from time to time, we may reach out to somebody that covers those teams and talk about them as well. So, anyways, that is the news. That's the show for today on this Wednesday. Tomorrow, I will be joined by Ole Miss 24/7 sports writer Jared Redding. We're going to get the opposite look at the Auburn Ole Miss game. Some interesting stuff with Jared. We already recorded that on Monday, but we talked about the Auburn Ole Miss side with the coaches. Hugh Freeze, of course, he used to coach Ole Miss, and Lane Kiffin. Look, how close was Lane Kiffin to becoming the Auburn head coach? I asked Jared that question, and we kind of get into the matchup and Ole Miss's season so far as well. But anyways, guys, that's going to do it for me here today. I hope you enjoyed the show. Hope you enjoyed my conversation with Tony. You'll be sure to hear from him through time to time here on the show. Anyways, I hope everybody has a great Wednesday. Remember, you can follow me on social media at P. Jordan SEC. The podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. Leave a review. I will read it on a future edition of the show. And if you leave just 4 stars, you're just a straight-up hater. You can check out the show over at wiregrassdailynews.com. You can always email me at sports.phillipjordan@gmail.com. Till next time.